than upheaval will come a transformation, ignite a fire that will burn like the sun, become a strong movement, fierce and determined, informed by where we are and where we've come from. We are those who are rising from Manila to Miami, building trust and solidarity. Love is our bond. And in the streets we are marching to end the rape and the suffering, to stop the fascist tyranny, organize as one. We are rising. We are rising. We are rising now and in this life. From those who dare to interrupt the violence, to those who expose the truth and break the silence, warriors who work to open up the prison bars, valiant souls who stand up against the unjust wars, multitudes who defy walls along the border, masses who unify to protect our water, rebel minds who unionize for workers' rights, feel it's hard to fight to defend trans lives, those who take back their land and their health, those who seek to redistribute the wealth, youth who demand a right to education, those who reclaim political power in their nation. We cry out, say her name. We chant love, trust, hate, and we will not be erased. It's we who decide our fate. We are rising. We are rising. We are rising now and in this life. We are rising. We are rising. We are rising now and in this life. We are women who endured violence and degradation, slavery, trafficking and mutilation, rape and abuse, racist discrimination, those who survive labor exploitation, colonization and gentrification, imprisonment, migration and militarization, homophobia and transphobic aggression, violence by police, reproductive oppression. But from the pain we will open eyes, awaken hearts and awaken minds, and that demands we intensify. Strategically we are organized, together we can raise the vibration through our action and imagination, respect, trust and communication, and love for our future generations. Intersectional, inclusive we come, collective power is how this is won. We keep it rising like the fire of the sun. We will rise like the sun. We will rise like the sun.
Hello, Cape Ann. I'm Amber Gomnitz. I'm a domestic violence and community advocate with Healing Abuse Working for Change in Gloucester.
I'm Brian King with the North Shore Health Project. I'm a medical case manager there.
And we both serve on the Gloucester Coalition for Prevention of Domestic Abuse. We're here together to talk to you about our upcoming event called 1 Billion Rising, which will be held at City Hall on February 3rd at 5 o'clock in the City Hall auditorium.
1 Billion Rising is a global movement that happens every year around Valentine's Day. It was started by Eve Ensler, who wrote the Vagina Monologues, and it really emphasizes that 1 out of 3 women in this world will experience violence, whether that's sexual assault or being beaten up, which translates to around 1 billion women globally.
So in Gloucester, we've been coming together for the last 7 years to recognize this event, that 1 Billion Rising, and come together to stand alongside survivors and stand up and say no more, that we will no longer abide by this violence, we will no longer allow this to continue to happen in our society, and that we really want to, as a community, say to survivors that we hear you, we see you, we trust you, we believe you, and we are here with you.
This is an incredible event because it happens globally, but really it's about local communities, like Amber said. So we really are encouraging folks from Cape Ann to come down to the City Hall on February 13th, Thursday, February 13th at 5 o'clock. We're going to gather there. There's going to be music, there's going to be speakers, stories, and a lot of resources. So if you're someone who's unaware of what's going on in the city around support for women and or any survivors of sexual assault or domestic violence, there'll be a lot of resources there and people you can meet, see their faces and make connections, so you can make resources for your friends, family members, or for yourself.
So each year we decide on a theme, sort of a general theme for the event, and we're focused this year on taking action. And it is really to honor the 100-year anniversary of a woman's right to vote in this country. And also, because this is an election year, we really feel like it is time for all of us to stand up and take action, to use our voices, and to change our world to be a safer place for all of us, and to really try to do whatever we can to stop this scourge of violence against women.
We have many speakers lined up. I think Amber can speak to that. But we also have music. So Amanda Cook, who's a local activist and writer, has organized a lot of the music, and Renee Dupuis, who's a songwriter, pianist, vocal coach, and performer, is going to be singing a pretty powerful song that I think is going to inspire them to action, actually.
So maybe, Brian, you want to talk a little bit more about this song, because the song is part of a performance, Medusa, that Brian's band and Brian himself wrote. Can you talk a little bit about that? It was an amazing, amazing event.
Well, the song is from our musical Medusa that we did at the Museum of Science in Boston, and most people know Medusa as the snake-haired monster, but really her story is much deeper than that. She was a victim of sexual assault who was turned into a monster. So the story of Medusa and our telling reclaims that. And at this point in the musical, Renee sings this song that is really about reclaiming power. And so we hope that with her huge voice that the folks here at City Hall on February 13th will be inspired to reclaim their own voice if they need to.
So we have additional people that will be coming. One of them is Jamie Bellasito, who's a friend of mine, and she has had a long history working on maternal child health and mental health issues, and she will be sharing some stories around trauma and what actions people can take to transform and heal from those experiences. And Brian and I were talking just earlier this morning that we often talk about recovery or healing as sort of, it's not return to who you were, what you were before these things in your life transpired. It's really a transformation. It's really utilizing things that have happened in your life to build upon who you are and inspire you to move through the next parts of your life.
Yeah. And one of the ways that people do that is through support, how we listen to each other, we support each other. So having a community gathering can be really powerful. So if you haven't been to one before, we're not going to make you do anything, but we'd really encourage you to come down and just feel what it's like to be with a bunch of people, a bunch of women, and people who support women, is to have this group experience. The mayor is going to be there. She's obviously going to have some very inspiring words as well, and then the whole coalition, the Gloucester's Coalition for the Prevention of Domestic Abuse, which has been around for a couple decades, I believe, started by Nikki Rashawn Scholl and Sunny Robinson, who is a lot of people know was the local public health nurse here for a long time. We meet every first Tuesday of the month at noon at the St. John's Church on Middle Street in Gloucester. We encourage you to join our coalition as well. There's a lot of resources from housing, public health nursing, the North Shore Health Project, HAWK, North Shore Rape Crisis Center, some local churches and other groups that show up every first Tuesday, and to all gather together to see what we can do to make Gloucester and Cape Ann a place where domestic violence is a thing of the past, hopefully.
And it is a really important group that we have in town, and we definitely encourage people to participate. Our community partners are really working together to try to raise awareness around violence and violence prevention measures, and talking about things like having trauma-informed personnel that are interacting with the public and really understanding that people who experience trauma, stories sometimes are nonlinear. That it's complicated, and that we should be approaching people with compassion and empathy at any point where we are engaging with them. And that's something that we really want to work with all of us to really encourage people to have trauma-informed training and request trauma-informed training with our public facing members. So also another group that's going to come and share stories about taking action is an immigrant-led co-op called Brillamos Juntos, which is Shine Together in English. And it's a group of women who have come together to really build livelihood and income around cleaning, cooking, childcare, what have you, but really coming together themselves to build a co-op so that they can have income and they can have self-determination in their lives. A lot of these women come from very, very complicated histories and stories where they had to travel overland and through really, really complicated situations and through away from violence and away from economic insecurity to try to build better lives for themselves and their families. So we have a couple women coming to share their stories and how they got here and how they formed that co-op.
And so just a reminder, once again, it's going to be at Gloucester City Hall, Thursday, February 13th, 5 o'clock. Speakers, music, group inspiration, gathering for 1 Billion Rising, which is happening, again, globally. You can Google it, 1 Billion Rising, and see all the photos all over the world that we will be part of. So please come on down.
Hi, we're back. We went to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to work with survivors in our community.
So Amber, if I was someone who's experiencing domestic violence in my life, in my relationship, maybe I'm living with my partner, I feel like I can't get out, I'm afraid to reach out because maybe that feels insurmountable, what might be some steps I might take to engage with Hawk?
So Hawk is located right here at 5 Pleasant Street, next door to the studio, actually. And we are open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we welcome walk-ins, but we encourage people to call and set up an intake. And obviously, people can call our offices or the hotline to find out about our services and how to engage in services and what kind of safety measures we can bring into our lives.
Yeah. So how do you support survivors? What are some of the ways that you do that?
Well, I'd say the most important thing with working with survivors is listening to survivors, trusting survivors, and believing in survivors, and really meeting them where they're at. No story is going to be the same as another individual's story, and their experiences, the skills people bring to the table, the point of whether or not they're ready to start really working on the trauma they've experienced. It really is going to be different depending on each individual you're working with. And so we are really trying to triage and meet people where they're at and build safety into their lives incrementally along the way. So that may be just being able to start talking about what they're experiencing and really being able to put it into words and start moving forward from just what the story is in their head to really what is the story and what can they do about it. We also work very closely with the police here in town and with the court system so we can help advocate and provide support for people who are trying to get orders of protection against people who are harming them. And we have advocates that work in the courts Monday, Tuesday, and Friday here at the Gloucester District Court. We encourage you to come in and talk to an advocate, even to find out what that process would look like about getting a restraining order. And then we can provide legal clinics for people who need to find out what that may look like and how that may impact their family as far as children and separation, visitation, child support, all of that. We can provide some guidance. We aren't able to provide legal representation, but we definitely can provide legal information and support. And we also have support groups that meet periodically. Basically every other month we'll start a new support group, and then that runs 6 to 8 weeks, where people can sit with other survivors and share their stories and learn about red flags and cycles of violence, coping skills, and really look at how to change patterns in their life to really build what they want for themselves and their families.
So if I'm someone who's experienced, say, violence in the past, if I'm not currently in a relationship that is, problematic, dangerous, or violent, but maybe I was in the past, and maybe, I'm finding it difficult to be in relationship because of things I've experienced, would the support group be a place I could still go
Definitely.
if I'm not currently experiencing violence?
Yes, it's not for it really is they're self-selecting to be in groups. So if the curriculum that we're providing is something that's good for that survivor, where it's definitely fine if it's something that's happened in your childhood, in your early adulthood, whenever. We want people to be able to find people who have similar stories that they can learn from and share with, and have that solidarity, and have allies that have experienced similar things that they need to work on and want to really feel like there are other people that understand where they're coming from.
And one thing I want to mention is that domestic violence and abuse and intimate partner violence doesn't always come across or is visible. It isn't always physical. Sometimes people can use power and control to manipulate their partners with social media, with preventing them from seeing their families, from keeping money from them. With people that I work with, who are mostly people living with HIV, sometimes partners might hold their medicine, that really their lifeline to staying healthy, and use that as a way of manipulating them, or threatening to out them about their HIV status. Sometimes that happens in the LGBTQ community too. If someone is not wanting to, let the community know that they're gay, lesbian, bi, or transgender, their partner might use that against them in order to control them. So there's lots of ways that people experience abuse, and I just wanted to mention that
One of the things we're definitely seeing, particularly in this climate in this country, is that immigration status is becoming a way that people really are abusing one another by holding their status over their head and threatening them with ICE as a way to manipulate and force them to behave the way they want them, and it's very scary. The women that I work with in the immigrant community, I'm very scared for.
Yeah.
Hey Brian, so how do you feel like this event, 1 Billion Rising, really intersects with your work at North Shore Health Project?
Well, as I'm a medical case manager for people living with HIV, and I do think that historically we often think of the people who have been impacted by HIV as being gay men, transgender people, bisexual people, IV drug users, but there's a whole population of women, particularly right now, one of the highest, the populations that are most impacted by HIV for new infections are women of color. But women in general often have been invisible in this epidemic, and so I definitely want to highlight that. And a lot of these women, were infected with HIV through relationship. So sometimes violence can mean that a partner is unwilling to wear a condom. Sexual assault, some people have experienced, been infected with HIV through sexual assault, or just unhealthy relationships. And sometimes the relationship seemed good, but the partner didn't know that they had HIV, and that's how HIV was transmitted. But as I've mentioned in other part of this segment, that sometimes women have experienced violence because of their HIV status, being outed about their HIV status, or literally beaten up when their partner finds out that they have HIV. So I really feel that these stories are often not told in the general media, the experiences of women living with HIV. And when we're talking about violence against women on a global scale, including domestic violence, including sexual assault, the stigma around HIV and how that impacts women, I think, is part of that story.
So in my work, often people ask me, how is it working with survivors? How do you do this work? It must be really difficult. And it's interesting, when I was going through my training, it was mentioned that with 1 in 3 being the statistic, 1 in 3 women experiencing physical or sexual assault, we're all working with survivors. At Walgreens, you're working with survivors. At the health center, obviously, you're working with survivors. At HawkOn, obviously, working with survivors. But literally everywhere, we're all working with survivors all day long. And that there isn't an us versus them in this. We're all walking together with this trauma that people have experienced through all different aspects of their life, and to some degree we're all survivors.
Right.
And that this is really why 1 Billion Rising is important, is that we're all coming together to say we're in this together, that we have all survived some sort of trauma, and we're here to support each other through that.
Yeah. And even if you feel that isn't who you are, that you haven't experienced trauma, but you want to do something, you want to show your support, it's really important for any community members to show up on February 13th and stand in solidarity, whether you're a woman or a man, or just you want to do something. Just being there so people feel less alone is also huge. The more people we can pack in, the bigger impact it has in the community. It will reverberate out. People who are there will feel like, okay, this community cares about my experience. They're here to support me. I don't know who all these people are, but maybe I might, and those, again, you don't necessarily, I always want to reach out to the people who feel afraid to go to these things because it might be outside their comfort zone. But you can come and you can just be there, and experience it and witness and feel what that's like, and maybe that might be the first step in reaching out.
And your presence is saying that you too are saying no to this violence. So we'd love to have you come out and join us at City Hall on February 13th at 5 o'clock for 1 Billion Rising.